There it sits majestically in the West Potomac Park in Washington, D.C. I'm referring to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, located on the National Mall, couched between the Lincoln Memorial and the Jefferson Monument. This 30-foot statue pays homage to a man who was not a politician, but he was a citizen of the world. And since its erection, thousands of people have come from around the nation and beyond to look at this 30-foot statue and to remember the price Dr. King paid for the homage he is being paid today, albeit posthumously. But I'm getting ahead of myself because it wasn't always this way for Black Americans, not by any stretch of the imagination. Listen, it's 1954. Amos Milburn, the Black R&B artist who made the song Bewildered popular in 1954, was one of the Black artists who performed at the world-famous Apollo Theater in Harlem. But in my judgment, the song had a double meaning. Milburn was singing about love and the many complexities of love. But truth be told, African Americans who lived below the Mason-Dixon line and even above it were also bewildered about the circumstances of their day and the things they had to endure. The country itself was in a prosperous mode after World War II. A number of Black men and women had served in the United States Armed Forces and served, might I add, honorably and admirably. Yet, when they returned to the States, it was the same old, same old. The separate but equal ruling that relegated Black students into substandard schools with inadequate supplies was the law of the land. Up South, as the North was often called, the racism was a bit more subtle, but no less humiliating.
Oh, yes, yes, I'm the great pretender, pretending that I'm doing well. My need is such, I pretend too much. I'm lonely, but no one can tell. Oh, yes, I'm the great pretender, adrift in a world of my own. I play the game, but to my real shame, you've left.
While the Platters, led by Tony Williams, was one of the most successful Black groups with crossover appeal back in the day, they still couldn't break through the economic glass ceiling regarding pay scale parity. White groups still made more money, played at better venues, often covering songs made famous originally by Black artists. So while the Platters records were being played on mainstream radio stations like Martin Block's Make Believe Ballroom in New York, their hit record, The Great Pretender, or Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, didn't catapult them into the big time as one might have thought.
That were jealous. Oh, nobody loves us. We hang our heads in shame. Nobody loves us. We're oh so nice and tame. Say nobody loves us. It really is a bump. Nobody loves us.
Popular band leader and singer Cab Calloway was knocking them dead at places like the Cotton Club, which regularly banned Black patrons from enjoying the music and talent of Black entertainers. Go figure. Young Black men and women were graduating from historically Black colleges and universities, but unable to find employment that matched their academic acumen. So, many wound up working in the post office, no shame to that, or operating elevators at some trendy department store up South or the North. I must concede that Black colleges and universities weren't above using subtle racism themselves to keep out those they thought were not worthy to enroll at that university. For instance, At some of the southern black colleges and universities, if a female was interested in becoming a student at that particular school, she had to send a photo of herself. And if she happened to be the right hue or the right color, she was admitted. If not, her application was denied. Now, a young black man did not have to suffer the same kind of indignity. And of course, such colleges shall remain nameless because obviously they would deny that such an edict existed, but it did. And so we have our own racism to look at and to analyze and certainly to criticize as well. While Amos Milburn was singing Bewildered and the Platters were singing hit records, there in the South was a woman named Big Mama Thornton. Yeah, I feel real good. I just want to let everybody know all about it. You ain't nothing but a house when Snoopy around the door. You ain't nothing but a house dog when Snoopy around the door. You can wag your tail, but I ain't gonna be you know. Told me you were acting, but I can see through that. Yeah, you know me you were acting, but I can see through that. And Daddy, I know you ain't no real fool cat. You ain't nothing but a house. Big Mama Thornton was an R&B singer from the South, most noted for her song Hound Dog. Of course, Elvis Presley came along and the song really blew up, to use the vernacular of the streets today, and it became a nationwide hit. And most people know Elvis from the song Hound Dog and, of course, Jailhouse Rock. Big Mama Thornton didn't do well. She made a few more records and then faded into oblivion, while Elvis became a phenomenon, and people are still calling his name today. The artists back then were relegated to a circuit known as the Chitlin Circuit. And it was black venues that catered to black audiences only, whether we're talking about the Howard Theater in Washington, D.C., the world-famous Apollo Theater in New York, the Regal Theater in Baltimore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where black performers really did what they did best: sing, dance, engage in comedic antics. But they really did not make the money that their white counterparts made, and caused quite a bit of bitterness. And in fact, they used an acronym, TOBA, Tough on Black Artists. And when they really wanted to get graphic, they would say, no, TOBA means Tough on Black Asses. That's what they said. I didn't. And so you have two entertainment entities, separate, certainly not equal. There was quite a bit of bitterness among the black artists who often saw the songs they wrote being sung by white artists, sometimes not even getting the credit for the songs they wrote, and they certainly, in many instances, didn't get paid. And so we're looking at a time where America itself was prospering, but there were many citizens who did not experience that same kind of prosperity. While black artists were singing pop music or R&B music, yes, and even gospel music, and while they sang well, and while they excelled in dancing and other forms of entertainment, there was also a political undercurrent going on. Separate but equal ruled the day in the educational system nationwide. And it was in 1954 that the United States Supreme Court enacted a ruling that said separate but equal education would be disbanded, and no longer would black children be separated from going to school with white children. There would be integration so that all students would have an opportunity to engage in the same kind of educational system. Now, there are many black educators today who don't necessarily think integration was the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it was a landmark decision. Thurgood Marshall, the late United States Supreme Court Justice, was the lawyer at that time who presented the case to the Supreme Court and won. It was a major victory for African Americans, even though today, as I said, there are some black educators who are not so sure that integration was the best thing for black children.
If you're feeling kind of low and your pulse is beating slow and you want to feel alive, listen to Dr. Jive.
We're also looking at a time where there was a man in New York City called Tommy Smalls. Actually, he was called Tommy Dr. Jive Smalls, and he was one of the most popular disc jockeys on the air. He produced and sponsored shows at the world-famous Apollo Theater. Artists always begged him to play their records, and he was the man. In fact, when Ed Sullivan, the great impresario on Channel 2, Sunday was not Sunday if we did not watch the Ed Sullivan Show, but before it was the Ed Sullivan Show, it was called Toast of the Town. And I remember there's a black and white film, there's black and white footage of Tommy Smalls on the Ed Sullivan Show, and Ed Sullivan himself is introducing this very popular disc jockey at that time. And then along came Alan Freed. Like a whirlwind into New York City, the station was WINS. He was known as Hound Dog back then and loved black music, came from Cleveland, Ohio, and just came in like a whirlwind to New York City and sort of overshadowed Dr. Jive and became the man, the go-to person. He meaning Alan Freed, began sponsoring and hosting shows at the Brooklyn Paramount. And so Tommy Smalls sort of went the way of the dinosaur, even though one of the reasons was because he was caught up in the payola scandal, as was Alan Freed. But before Alan Freed came along, Tommy, Dr. Jive Smalls, was the man. Meanwhile, blacks were dancing at the Savoy and going to other venues to have a good time. And while they were dancing and while they were singing, there was always the black church located in the midst of the community, and there was always the black preacher or the missionary or the deaconess telling most of these young people that they had given their souls to the devil and they were going to hell because they were listening to music that would not edify their souls. The black church was quite influential in those days. In fact, if anybody on the choir decided that they wanted to sing secular music, they were usually ousted from the choir. That's just how serious it was back in the day.
Just laughing and playing like a clown. I seem to be what I'm not. You see, I'm wearing my heart like a crown, pretending that you're still around. Still around.
This narrator hasn't finished discussing the dichotomy that went on back then regarding music, regarding politics, and how it affected Black America, and how the music was as political as politics itself. But we're coming back, and we're going to continue talking about the music from back in the day, politics, how it has blossomed in the 21st century.